Hello my disciples, Father Andrew here. Welcome to another episode of Character Cross Section. Today we're covering the Ink Demon from Bendy and the Ink Machine and its sequel Bendy and the Dark Revival. Now diving straight into the inky abyss, putting my pen to paper, we're going to go over what the Ink Demon is. The Ink Demon is the main antagonist of the Bendy franchise. The Ink Demon being a creation of Joey Drew Studios in an attempt to create their mascot Bendy in a physical form using the Ink Machine. Bendy being their first attempt at doing so, only for the creature to come out deformed as it lacked a soul, which also happens to several other creatures that come out of the machine due to them too lacking a soul. But anyway, the Ink Demon is the biggest threat to anything residing in the Ink world, in constant pursuit to find and kill anything in proximity to him. All of that being a very general and surface level summary of the character. The Ink Demon changing greatly between Bendy and the Ink Machine and Bendy and the Dark Revival. Now getting into the character's history, at an unknown day after the Ink Machine was set up, the Ink Demon was made as their first attempt to bring a character to life, interestingly enough as a living attraction. I presume to go along with the theme park that was being built, but regardless he was deemed a failure due to not only a lack of a soul but due to how deformed he came out. Initially around this point the Ink Demon was completely harmless and made no real attempt to even hurt anyone and just kind of roamed around the studio mindlessly. But due to its unearthly presence and appearance, this made a lot of the staff uncomfortable. Thomas Connor's third audio log in chapter 5 going into more detail on this, which I will play for you now.
Progress report to Chet Home Office. Client, Joey Drew Studios. Although we're making progress, the client's expectations keep changing. What started as a machine to simply mold life-size figures now seems to be teetering on the edge of magic more than engineering. Although Mr. Drew remains convinced they're the same thing, the process of running the cartoon filled through the machine for the figures to imprint upon themselves is going well. We've had several near successes. One weird note, the first figure ever created was a failed attempt in the likeness of the character called Bendy. Since that time, no other attempts of this particular figure have emerged. And the one that did, I don't know. There's just something unworldly about him.
As said by the man himself, they tried to make these characters, Bendy came out wrong, and there was something unearthly about him. But anyway, after this, Joey Drew demanded that Thomas lock the Ink Demon away, which he did. Sometime later, in the summer of 1946, in the novel Dreams Come to Life, a Bendy and the Ink Machine prequel book, the Ink Demon was set free from its imprisonment after Buddy heard him sadly moaning and crying out, presumably for help. Buddy being the 17-year-old protagonist of the book. After this, Buddy unlocks the door, enters the room, finds the Ink Demon has vanished, and then turns around only for it to appear, push him down and then run off, escaping from containment. The Ink Demon later being revealed to be the creature Sammy Lawrence is describing during the ritual, which in turn appears on stage as part of the sacrifice. Albeit instead of killing Jacob, it grabs Dave's arm and rips off his corpse before grabbing Dot and squeezing her. Not enough to kill her, but enough to severely hurt her. Buddy then rescues Dot from the Ink Demon's clutches, and Dot cuts off one of the creature's legs. The Ink Demon is later dropped into an ink-filled trapdoor in the court theatre, causing him to become deformed and become one with the ink, but he catches Buddy off guard and drags him into the ink after falling into said ink. Ink Demon managing to form itself back together, it manages to stay above the ink long enough to dissect Buddy with its teeth, and then pull him under the ink and drown him. Said demon throughout the book causes issues for the studio, primarily after hours, but I'm not going to sit here and break down the whole book, I'm just going over the past of the character. In the second novel, The Lost Ones, the Ink Demon reappears. He's assumably released by Bill, Constance and Brant. It attacks them, grabs Brant, he manages to break free, and for some reason it attacks the Ink Machine for an unknown reason. Towards the end of said novel, it's confronted by Brant as a lost one. He manages to avoid the Ink Demon after a chase, and then the Ink Demon presumably captured by Jerry and taken back to New York alongside the Ink Machine afterwards. Albeit the second book doesn't make it exactly clear what the fuck happened. Then there's Boris and the Dark Survival, a prequel to Bendy and the Ink Machine, and a sequel to the Dreams Come to Life book. The Ink Demon once again returning as the main antagonist, acting like he did in chapter 3, actively roaming around the map randomly. But sadly there's not much to talk about with this one, so the next part in the timeline is the events of Bendy and the Ink Machine, the first game. And so with that, we've essentially summarised the character's past. He was created by accident, he doesn't have a soul, he was locked away, and it's not exactly explained why he became aggressive. It's presumed that he was experimented on and tested on, or presumably tortured by Joey Drew as some part of experiment, or potentially by the Gent Company as to try and understand why he came out deformed. And considering Gent are the company behind the ink machine being created, it would make perfect sense for them to be the ones poking and prodding this creature as to figure out what went wrong. Also, we skipped over the Bendy book, Fade to Black, because I am not at all sure if that one's canon. Probably isn't. The books as a whole are a bit dubious. But regardless, with that we've summarised the character's entire past, and now we're going to move on to his personality. Starting with the first game, there's not very much to work with. All we know is that the Ink Demon in the first game is quite egotistical, as he doesn't take kindly to cardboard cutouts of him being smashed. That, and he's exceedingly aggressive, showing no remorse in the first game and seems to have sadistic tendencies. The best example of this being after he kills the projectionist. Directly after killing and decapitating it, he looks at you as you're hiding in the little miracle station. He has a perfect opportunity to kill you here, but he doesn't. He just stares at you and then walks off slowly, almost as if to say, yeah, I'll get to you soon, don't you worry about that. Also, considering that in chapter 5 he has a whole throne room, that really shows the ego of the Ink Demon. But apart from all that, there's not much to say about the first game's Ink Demon. Oh, but when we get to the second game, however, there is a lot more to say about him. Much like his counterpart in the first game, he is violent and egotistical, albeit now having a proper personality and voice. Said personality and voice showcasing him as a sadistic demon with no sense of remorse for his atrocities. He's actively trying to kill Audrey throughout the game and ensure that the cycle continues, actively trying to keep himself as the ruler of the cycle. However, there's two caveats to this. He absolutely despises Wilson for his ego and desire to take control of the cycle, even warning Audrey not to trust this guy. But of course, Audrey does, because this thing has literally been trying to kill her, so she has no reason to listen to it. But towards the end, after Audrey's legs have been Joe Swansoned by Wilson's failed creation, and the Ink Demon kills said creation, it says this.
It's time.
Notice what the Ink Demon says here. You're a mistake, a monster, like me. This shows that the Ink Demon is not only fully aware of his nature, he has fully embraced that he is this creature. However, it's likely that he's merely projecting his own existence onto her, as this only really applies to him, especially with the ending showing that, in reality, Joey Drew went out of his way to create Audrey deliberately, and that she was made as a daughter to him. The Ink Demon also has an open distaste for Joey Drew and declares that the failures of his life will end with his death before killing the memory of Joey Drew in the Ink world. This being after Audrey's soul becomes part of the demon, becoming its Giga Chad form. The creature also telling her that there's nothing she can do to truly end the cycle for good, showing that it seems to have a nihilistic worldview. But ultimately, we can summarize the Ink Demon's personality as arrogant, sadistic, egotistical, violent and brutal. Of course, all of this applying until the cycle is finally restarted, at which point Bendy is turned into his cartoon Bendy form and stays with Audrey in the real world, recreated as a more benevolent entity, presumably bringing an end to the Ink Demon's rule. Albeit we'll have to wait for future releases to see if that's true or not, and with Bendy the Cage set for release in the future, we can only really wait and see. And so with that has been the Ink Demon. But before we end this video, I actually want to talk about a few things, and that being why the Ink Demon's design changed from the first game to the second. Honestly, I think it was the cycle continuing, resulting in Bendy just continuously becoming more and more deformed as time passed, and his form settling into this more demonic Wendigo-esque design, which I think fits the demon's overall personality better. I mean, the existence of the Widow enemies, which appear to be at one point having been a Butcher Gang member, albeit it's mutated to a point where it's now filling in the ecological role of a spider. I'm pretty sure it was the Striker that had the mouth on top of his head. I'm not sure which one it was, I can't remember. But the point is, that creature could also be a result of this same process, which is a perfect time to mention that because the cartoon world we see in Dark Revival is an entire dimension, an entire plane of existence with an entire recreation of Earth presumably in it, that means there's plenty of cartoon life forms we haven't seen in the Bendy universe. I mean, we see plants and fish in Dark Revival, so I'm gonna be honest, there's probably things like rats and other animals running around that we just haven't seen yet. Said plants we do see in Dark Revival appearing to be some variety of rose and lily pads and a few other things. I do expect Bendy the Cage to do more world building, which honestly I would love to see from the Bendy franchise. I'd like to see what else resides in the Ink realm outside of the Ink Demon and the things around that. I feel like as a whole, Bendy's timeline and world building need more detail. Meanwhile, the characters are actually pretty alright. Some of the side characters don't have much going on, but then again, they're side characters. But yeah, that concludes my little ramble about Bendy's writing and world building. And that concludes our video about the Ink Demon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Catch you in the next character cross section. Goodbye.